oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, Canada had a pandemic alert system that was admired by everyone. But in 2018, the Liberal government cancelled this mandate for Canadian experts. They didn't want to contradict official data from the Chinese government. Mr. Speaker, why? Is this Prime Minister listening more to the Chinese government than our Canadian experts? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, that's entirely false. Since the beginning, we've relied on expert advice, and funding and personnel have remained constant since 2015 for that unit, and we're concerned by reports saying that they couldn't do their work, even though for several weeks the minister conducted an independent examination so if their work could continue. We took the pandemic seriously from day one, and we're working with experts. That's what we've done since the beginning. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has just said that he's listening to experts. But experts, well, senior officials have said that the Liberal government's decision was incomprehensible. Our Canadian experts are denouncing the ideological decision of the PM. When the Prime Minister trusts Chinese data more than our own Canadian data, why? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, that's just anything. It's not true. Since the beginning, we've been working with scientists and we've been listening to them. And in terms of the agency he's talking about, the funding and the personnel of that agency have remained the same since 2015. And moreover, we heard concerns from public servants, and we conducted an investigation. We started one a few weeks ago, so we know what could happen, and we can continue to work with scientists as best possible. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister said that he would follow what our allies were doing when it comes to Huawei. As part of the Five Eyes, we share intelligence with the United Kingdom. This morning, their House of Commons found that Huawei is strongly linked to the Chinese state and the Chinese Communist Party, despite claims to the contrary. Why is this Prime Minister ignoring all the warnings about Huawei in Canada's 5G network?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. We've worked very closely with our allies and Five Eyes partners around the world to ensure the safety and security of Canadians and of our infrastructure. We will continue to make decisions based on expert advice, on our intelligence and security professionals as we move forward to do what we need to do to keep Canadians safe in an increasingly interconnected world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, his security experts are reading the report out of the UK that found that Huawei had been financed by the Chinese state to a tune of $75 billion in the last 3 years. It also found that Huawei had engaged in a variety of intelligence, security, and intellectual property violations around the world. In Canada, the National Post has reported that Huawei theft may have led to the downfall of Nortel, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 4 of the 5 Eyes have spoken when it comes to Huawei. Why is this Prime Minister the only one with his eyes closed?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we continue to be very focused on keeping Canadians safe. We are certainly aware of all these reports and are looking very carefully at them, but we trust our experts in our security realm, in our intelligence realm, to make fact-based recommendations to us. They are gathering information from our partners. They are looking at the situation. We will move forward in a responsible way that keeps Canadians safe, as we have every step of the way.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the potential closure of the Come-By-Chance refinery could mean up to 1,400 job losses across Newfoundland and Labrador. It would affect dozens of harbour and outport communities in the province. We're also learning that it could create a severe propane shortage, leaving 2,000 households relying on ferry services during the winter. The head of the local steelworkers union said that the Natural Resource Minister has been silent. Mr. Speaker, when will that minister finally speak up for the people of Arnold's Cove and the citizens of Newfoundland and Labrador?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is lovely to hear the Conservatives finally realizing there is a Newfoundland and Labrador that we need to preoccupy ourselves with. We have been working with them very closely, both our Minister of Natural Resources and the new Premier, whom I spoke to just days ago, to talk about how we can continue to work to support workers in Newfoundland and Labrador and indeed in energy sector across the country. We will continue to be there to stand up for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. We will continue to be there to support our workers right across the country as we move forward through this difficult time and into decades to come.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in my question, I had barely pronounced the word machine gun when right away the PM responded by talking about party financing. The idea associations in the brain can make her crazy. Then I asked him if he knew Mr. Huawei, a criminal arrested in Toronto, and right away he talked about Liberal Party financing. He must be important, Mr. Huawei, for Liberal Party funding. Is this because Mr. Huawei and his gang stopped funding the Liberal Party because they requested the wage subsidy? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The member for La Prairie. Yesterday, the National Post reported that a rich Toronto businessman, Mr. Huawei, was arrested for arms possession and held in an underground casino. Mr. Huawei met with the PM on May 6, 2016, accompanied by the founder of Wealth One Bank. 3 days later, Mr. Huawei met with the PM again to discuss trade relations between China and Canada. So here's another simple question. How much all of these meetings between the Prime Minister and rich Chinese investors from Toronto have raked in for the Liberal Party? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The rules we have in place for the federal government for party financing are very robust, and ours are even stricter. Party financing activities are all public, and we even invite journalists to take part in them to observe. Instead of acting in secret, the other parties, the Conservatives and the Bloc, should make their funding activities public so that Canadians can see who is funding them. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As small businesses fear to have to close their doors because of COVID-19, big companies are making record profits on COVID-19. We are proposing a tax on excessive profits of big companies during this pandemic. Is the Prime Minister on the side of billionaires or small businesses? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The first thing that we did when we came to power in 2015 was to increase taxes on the richest 1% so that we could reduce taxes for the middle class, and that's exactly what we did. But unfortunately, the New Democrats voted against this initiative. We are always going to try to create economic wealth and ensure that our tax system is fair for everyone. And we're always going to help the middle class and those who are working hard to reach it. And we're going to get through this pandemic together by taking care of the health and our economy.
Mr. Speaker, I spoke with Jennifer and Kane, Dominion grocery store workers who barely earn minimum wage and are struggling to get by, while large corporate grocery stores made massive profits off the pandemic. We're proposing a tax on excess profits made by wealthy corporations during the pandemic. Now, does the Prime Minister stand with billionaire profiteers, or does he stand with working people? Will the Prime Minister tax the excess profits made by wealthy corporations off the pandemic?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize the extraordinary frontline workers like Jennifer who every day help keep food on our shelves, keep our economy rolling even in the most difficult moments of the shutdown. That is why we stepped up on supports for workers, for small businesses, for families, and we will continue to work to ensure that we're supporting Canadians through this pandemic and beyond. In regards to the wealthy, first thing we did was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them for the middle class. Unfortunately, the NDP voted against that initiative.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, today we found out that some Quebec schools have had to resort to using private firms to test their teachers for COVID and keep their students safe because the Prime Minister has failed to get rapid tests into their hands. Yep. Our publicly funded healthcare system, which to be very clear, the Conservative Party strongly supports, is breaking because the Prime Minister has failed to do his job and get these tests into the hands of Canadians when other countries around the world have done so months ago. Yep. Why?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we've worked with provinces and territories to make sure that they have the tools, the financial support, the expertise, the additional personnel to manage the outbreak. We'll continue to work with provinces like Ontario, Quebec, and indeed all the provinces and territories to ensure they have what they need. Mr. Speaker, this is a complex situation. As the member knows, we've approved a number of rapid tests, and we have been all along. And Mr. Speaker, we'll make sure that the provinces and territories have equal access to those tests as soon as they arrive.
Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
They've done such a great job that some provinces have had to send tests to California to be processed. They've done such a great job that people are waiting 10 days for their results. And now we're seeing Quebec schools having to use private firms against the notion of publicly funded healthcare in Canada because of their failure to procure tests. This government is deceiving Canadians. There are no rapid tests in the hands of Canadians, no widespread use, and it's because of their failure and this minister's incompetence. When will it be in widespread use?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it appears the member opposite is deceiving Canadians because, in fact, we've had rapid tests in the field since early months of COVID-19, supporting rural and remote communities, Indigenous communities, to make sure they have access to testing in a rapid and convenient way because they are such fragile and vulnerable communities. Mr. Speaker, we've spent billions of dollars supporting provinces and territories to boost up their capacity to test, to trace, to isolate. We've got rapid response programs to go into hotspots to support provinces and territories with human resource challenges, and we'll continue, Mr. Speaker, to do whatever it takes to help Canadians through this.
Honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
To be clear, this minister considers a 10-day wait for tests rapid. It's ridiculous. The reality is that somebody standing in line waiting for their results in any part of the country today is not going to have an access to a rapid test because this minister has failed to do her job. We know that these tests aren't going to be available in widespread use at the earliest next year, and it's because they've failed. We're going into Thanksgiving weekend. We're hearing warnings about an even greater outbreak because we don't have rapid tests. When will these tests be in widespread use across the country?
Well, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, again, I reiterate my offer to have the member opposite briefed by the department to understand that testing is really only one aspect of containing COVID-19. Of course, testing is an important aspect, but provinces also need the opportunity to contact trace, to isolate, to ensure they protect vulnerable communities. Mr. Speaker, we've been working on this side of the House since day one. I encourage the member opposite to learn a bit more about how to contain these outbreaks.
The Honourable for Louis St. Laurent. Mr. Speaker, since day one, the government has been dragging its heels in terms of adopting rapid testing for COVID. The result is we've learned that schools in the Quebec region have to call on a private company to test for testing results for teachers. Sometimes Quebec has to wait 6, 9, or 10 days for results. Why? Because this government took a long time to evaluate rapid testing. Why? The Honourable Minister. I've had a good discussion with my colleague, Mr. Dubé.
Reports that we'll continue to offer to Quebec and to the Quebecois to ensure that they have what they need as they combat the second wave. Mr. Speaker, we have approved rapid tests. We have rapid tests in the field, and they are not the only solution, Mr. Speaker, to combating COVID-19. We also have to ensure that we have human resources to contact trace, to isolate close contacts. And, Mr. Speaker, we're there for Quebec for those issues as well. We'll continue to work with the provinces and territories on this side, Mr. Speaker, to meet them with what they need to contain the virus.
The Honourable for Louis St. Laurent. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Dubé, like all Canadians, wants to have rapid testing because this way teachers won't have to wait days and days for results. School boards won't have to pay private companies. So here's a simple question, Minister. How come in Japan they've had rapid testing since March and in the U.S. since August, but the government just woke up last week? The Honourable Minister.
Apply to Health Canada to get approval for rapid tests. We've been able to quickly turn around those approvals. In fact, the last test was in under 30 days. Mr. Speaker, we're continuing to work with industry and to ensure that applicants apply to Canada to sell these rapid tests here. But I will repeat, Mr. Speaker, they are not a silver bullet to managing COVID-19. In fact, experts around the world have said that you need to have a robust strategy to contain the virus that includes, of course, testing, but also contact tracing, also isolation. Mr. Speaker, we'll stop at nothing to support provinces and territories to protect their citizens. Thank you.
I can appreciate the honourable members distancing themselves, but they don't have to talk loud. They can cut their masks on and go to the side and do it quietly. They don't have to shout across the aisle to hear what they're saying with their friends. The honourable member for Banff Airdrie.
October 15th marks Infant Loss Remembrance Day. It's a difficult day for many families across Canada, and parents grieving the loss of a child deserve compassion from their government. And certainly no grieving parent should ever have to navigate a cold, heartless bureaucracy. The HUMA report that's called Supporting Families After the Loss of an Infant Child sets a clear path forward to ensure that parents don't suffer any undue financial or emotional distress as a result of government programming. That report, though, has been gathering dust for nearly 2 years. So when are the Liberals finally going to take action?
The Honourable Minister. Pick one. The Honourable Minister. Pick one. Anyone.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the honourable member that our policies are informed with making sure that children have the best possible start in life. We have re-engineered our programs to make sure that the processes to obtain them are easy and efficient for people. We have hired a number of agents to make sure that people's questions about government programs are answered, and we've also tasked thousands of trusted community liaison officers to be able to go out into the community to bring people into government programs and get the benefits that they are eligible for instead of having them miss on those